Hello, what is going on everybody? It is Q back again for another video, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time and get it straight out of the way. I apologize for this extended hiatus that I've taken for this last month. I'm going to be honest with you, I've had a lot of family stuff going on, and just mentally I haven't really been in the headspace to make a good video for you guys. I've just been kinda not feeling it. I couldn't really think of a video to make other than just playing a bunch of Dead by Daylight, and also this video is going to address some of the reasons why I haven't been playing Dead by Daylight, because as you can tell by the title of this video, we are going to be discussing what is DBD and how did we get here. Now, to understand where we are at in DBD, I think this all really started when we take it back a year and we look at the Houndmaster release, or at least that's where I'm going to start, because that's where some of these balancing issues and some of the things that have been going on for the past year that people have really been up in arms about and is what really got in DBD in the face of social media and things like that started. Now, the Houndmaster release was an incredibly underwhelming release. Obviously, she is an original killer, so of course you're going to think an original killer from behavior. It should be good. Not only should it be good, but she should at least be, playable. Not that she wasn't necessarily playable, but it's just playing her over other killers on her release was just kind of a stupid decision to make. It's like playing perkless add-onless Trapper, as I'm doing in the background here. Don't get me wrong, can you win with perkless add-onless Trapper? Yes. Can you win with Houndmaster? Yes. Is it going to be fun? No. And are you going to have to sweat your nuts off to maybe even get a 2K? Probably. Now, with the release of Houndmaster, like I said, her release was just incredibly underwhelming. She was an incredibly weak killer with an incredibly weak power and didn't really offer much over other killers and offered a reason for her to be played over other killers. Don't get me wrong, did she have an interesting power? Yes, but was it a good power? No. Just because a killer has an interesting power and a power that on paper and in theory sounds like a good idea does not necessarily mean that it's going to be executed properly, as the Houndmaster's wasn't. On release, she was incredibly buggy, and with every new update that comes out, it seems that her and the twins just kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to bug fixing and when it comes to just overall quality of life changes in general. Now, the Houndmaster, as of the current meta of the game, is kind of outside of the meta. Again, she's not an incredibly strong killer. She's not an incredibly good killer. Dead by Daylight behavior, they are making an attempt to make her more viable and kind of bring every killer that's on the lower end more towards a middle of like an A- to a B rating for killers, and then take those S-rated killers and bring them down a little bit. Not so much the S-rated killers, because the S-rated killers, the higher tier killers like Billy, Nurse, and Blight have not really received many nerfs that have brought them down to the same level as the other killers, so they're not really receiving as many nerfs, but the lower tier killers are receiving a good amount of buffs. I mean, Freddy got a rework that made him viable again. Houndmaster is getting buffed at every update after every update and is becoming more and more viable as every update passes. And I mean, Ghoul got 2-3 nerfs, and then Krasu is getting another nerf sometime within the near future. So they are making at least an attempt to bring those high ends down and those lower ends up to find somewhere in the middle where every killer can meet and be balanced. Now, the Houndmaster released with 3 perks that weren't necessarily game-breaking. The Scourge Hook perk that she came with, Jagged Compass, was actually not too awful. You hook somebody, you see the aura. It's not too horrible, and it actually has some good synergy with a good amount of builds if you like running aura reading. And then there is her other perk that after you fall, it increases your lunge distance by 75% for 16 seconds, which is kind of a counter to Balanced Landing almost, but not really, because Balanced Landing you can really kind of escape within that time. And then her other perk, which was just not of a lot of mention. It just wasn't really that great. It was basically Merciless Storm, but for healing. Now, again, she did release with 3 perks that you could use in some fun builds. Now, I'm not going to say that any of those perks were downright awful, because I don't think that any of them were downright awful, and really, when it comes to Dead by Daylight, one of the things that I like the most about this game is you can find perks to work with any build that you pretty much want to, and as long as you hone in on that build, and as long as you play well, you can absolutely make pretty much any combination of perks work. But as I said, the glaringly obvious issue with Houndmaster is she is just not a balanced killer. She is on the weaker side for an original killer, much like the Unknown, who is now, as everybody who's seen the Ots Darva video knows, is known as the Harmless. He's not necessarily really a hard killer to counter. All you have to do is look at him, and he's kind of cooked. You can't really do anything about it, and his power is damn near useless, right? Again, does that make him a bad killer? Absolutely not. Is he still an incredibly fun killer to play? Is he still an incredibly fun killer to, hit crazy bank shots with his power? Absolutely. But is he a balanced, good killer? Not by any means at all. With the Houndmaster update and the 8.4 PTB and the glaringly obvious issues with Houndmaster's AI as it occurs to her Hound and everything, this is where I started to see the issues with behaviors balancing and the way that they handle their characters. And it did not get much better for their killer that they released afterward, the Ghoul, which everybody knows was a problem when he released. Another testament to behavior's awful balancing is the Ghoul and how strong the Ghoul was on release. The Ghoul, when he released, was probably one of the top 4 or 5 strongest killers in the game, up there with the likes of Dracula, the Singularity, the Spirit, Twins, Hillbilly, in that upper echelon of strong characters. And the reason that he was so high up there was his risk to reward ratio, or his effort to reward ratio is more like it. And what I mean by that is when it comes to the Ghoul, you do not have to put in much effort in order to win with him, to get 3Ks, 4Ks. He is one of the simpler killers in the game and is one of the easier killers to play for how strong he is. Now, don't get me wrong, the stronger killers in the game are not necessarily hard to play by any means. Nurse is probably one of the easier killers to play, and not easy in the sense that she's very easy to pick up, but you can take a new player, somebody who has never played DBD before, and stick him on Nurse for roughly 2 hours, and he's going to be a very solid killer, and is going to be incredibly well off. Same thing with, again, those higher tier killers like Blight and Hillbilly. Hillbilly has a little bit of skill required to him just because of the amount of skill that it kind of takes to curve him correctly with his chainsaw and everything, but again, after you put a little bit of time into him, he's really not that difficult. Where there are killers that require a bit more time to master. Somebody like Vecna, who has 4 different spells that you have to memorize, and you kind of have to know when and where to use them and when not to use them. And like the Unknown, which the Unknown, obviously, since he is so just kind of weak in the state that he's in right now, and just the fact that he has the ability to just be stared at and his ability is basically useless, that's why I think that behavior's balancing is just kind of awful, because there are some killers that are incredibly easy to pick up and incredibly easy to learn that have insane powers and insane potential for you to have minimal effort and get high reward, and then there are other killers where it takes a lot of time to learn them and perfect them, and even 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get that perfect 3 to 4K. Another reason that the Ghoul was incredibly powerful upon release was his ability to kidnap, his ability to hit people over pallets and vault himself over pallets and get that first hit free. And even in the current state that he is in the game, he is still probably one of the top killers just because of how easy he is to play and how easy it is to get that first hit and how easy it is to traverse around the map with him, go check gens, or if you hit somebody with that first hit that you get and then you enrage yourself. Now you have 3 leaps to catch up to them, which makes it 10 times easier to catch up to a survivor, and his ability to switch out of his enraged form and switch out of his active ability form so quickly and just be able to get a very easy M1 on another survivor is just absolutely insane and gives you a very, very minimal room for error when you're in a chase with such a killer. And now, this simple little balance bug with killers such as the Ghoul and Dracula and Singularity and those high-tier killers, that just make them incredibly annoying to play against, and it makes survivors just want to DC and get out of the game. Because why even bother playing with the Ghoul when you know you're not going to have fun? You're just going to get chased down at 5 gens, and you're just going to lose. That's a thing that has also been an incredibly serious problem with Dead by Daylight, is the epidemic of survivors just disconnecting when they get a not-so-favorable match. And killers are just as susceptible to this, or just as at fault for this, as survivors are. But we will get to this topic a little bit later. Now, to continue our harping on behavior's awful balancing is actually something that is bringing a little bit of goodness to the situation, that is bringing actually something very good to the table when it comes to behavior, and that is the spring trap. Now, granted, his chapter was a very underwhelming chapter. You got no survivor, you got 3 perks that aren't necessarily the greatest and aren't really that useful, all things considered, but you did get a pretty decently strong killer. Now, after a few nerfs to add-ons in his kit, he is a bit lower than he was, but he is still a relatively balanced killer and is still relatively fun to play. Now, granted, he does have one of the most pay-to-win skins in the game, being the glitch trap skin that just makes pretty much everything about his kit so much quieter and so much harder to identify, but even then, he is still an incredibly fun killer to play against, and not a killer that you necessarily have to sweat for, but will give you a bit of a challenge playing as killer to where it's actually fun to play him. And now, the problem with Springtrap isn't even necessarily the killer balancing, it's the way that he was released. He was released in a time where Dead by Daylight and Behavior were promising to do health updates to their game, and they didn't do much of that really before releasing Springtrap. And even though that they promised they were going to, they released him, and he was, again, a balanced killer, but he released with no survivor and one of probably the biggest chapters in the game's history. There are few chapters that have really been as big as Springtrap's. Maybe Resident Evil's has been as big as this, but other than that, there are very few chapters and very few killers and survivors that have released into Dead by Daylight that had as much hype around them as the animatronic has. Now, we are going to take a short break from talking about the killers that have been released and things that have been releasing on the killer side, and we are going to talk a little bit more about the survivor side and the overall discussion that has been going on around Dead by Daylight and the things that have been going on more recently before we get to the Krasu, the Haunted by Daylight, and some of the most recent things. Now, to begin talking about the politics of the game, I think we must first talk about that first PTB where they introduced the idea of anti-tunneling and anti-slugging changes that basically gave survivors an incredible amount of base kit perks. Base kit off the record, base kit unbreakable, they didn't have to move in order to recover, which granted is not an awful or they didn't have to, sorry, it's not that they didn't have to move, it's just the fact that they automatically started recovering when they weren't moving. You didn't have to hold down a button, which, granted, is a pretty solid and good change, but all the anti-slug and anti-tunnel changes were kind of obnoxious. Giving everybody base kit unbreakable, which was one of the better perks in the game, if not one of the best survivor perks in the game, to counter slugging, was just an incredibly ridiculous thing to do, and they just don't understand. Behavior just fundamentally does not understand how to balance a game correctly, right? Because you cannot just give survivors a bunch of base kit perks, a bunch of strong base kit perks, I might add, and then just say, oh, this is a fix. You have to slowly implement these things one by one over time, or you're never really going to get to the root of the issue, right? You can't just give them base kit off the record, base kit unbreakable, elusive, like these things that fundamentally are just giving them some of the stronger perks in the game as a part of their base kit, and just give them to them off the rip without introducing them slowly, because that creates a fundamental break in the game. Let's say that we did give them base kit unbreakable, right? Let's say that we gave them base kit unbreakable, and then that PTB came out, and that overall was horrible for the game, all right? In this hypothetical situation, it was horrible for the game. It was making killers DC more. It was making survivors DC more. It was increasing tunneling and slugging and things like that. Then you would know that giving them that specific perk, base kit, and that specific fix isn't something that's going to work for your game. But giving them all of these perks and all of these things at the same time does not allow you to narrow it down to what is really fixing the game, and overall it just makes updates and game balancing much more convoluted and much more crowded, because now you have no way of really telling what stuck and what worked. Another part of that PTB that was just simply awful were the anti-tunneling changes. The fact that you could not get a kill without having your generators completely turned around on you before you got 6 hooks. It is hard for some killers to even get a kill before 4 hooks, before 5 hooks, but 6 hooks is absolutely outrageous. Some of the lower tier killers in the game, that is damn near impossible. Don't get me wrong, higher tier killers, it's absolutely not difficult, but some of the lower tier killers, killers like Bubba, killers like Cenobite, killers like Nemesis, it's incredibly hard for them to do such things just because their power doesn't really prohibit them to focus that many survivors at one time, right? You would have to get 2 hook stages on 3 separate survivors, which is 75% of the survivors in the game, in order for them to finally allow you to get a kill, or otherwise your generators just get completely turned around on you. They get a 25% generator buff. That is absolutely ridiculous and just quite frankly obviously game breaking for both killers and survivors. Not to mention all of the buffs that they gave them when they came off of hook, people were using so aggressively. People would get hooked or people would get unhooked off of their second hook and then directly run at killers in order to get tunneled out of the game, just so that the rest of their friends could get a 25% buff, 3 of them would get out, and the survivors would win the game for that round. Now, I don't want to speak too much on that PTB, because hundreds upon hundreds probably of creators have spoken about this, the likes of Otstarva, Hens, Quiet Kill, Scott Jund, Arian, hundreds and, many bigger creators that understand the situation better than I do have spoken about this and understand it at a much deeper level than I do. So we are going to, again, switch topics from that original PTB, because I believe that you guys understand the point that I'm trying to make with that PTB. Let's talk about meta builds and the things that are fundamentally going wrong with this game when it comes to having a decided meta. Now, when you are playing killers that are incredibly strong, when you're playing things like Kaneki, when you're playing things like Nurse, Blight, these things, right? And the fact that these killers are so popular, it forces survivors into playing in a way that guarantees them safe wins. Playing with perks like Stakeout and Hyper Focus, which is a fundamentally broken combo. I know I'm saying fundamentally, right? But it really is. It is just a broken combo. The fact that Stakeout gives you free great skill checks and then Hyper Focus makes your great skill checks just give you so much more progress on gens. The fact that you can solo finish a gen in around 40 to 50 seconds, it's just quite preposterous, right? But the problem with behaviors balancing is the fact that these killers are so strong and so apparent even in low-level lobbies, it is forcing survivors to play in a way that gives them safe wins. And then by forcing survivors to play in a way that gives them safe wins, you are then by extension forcing killers to play in a way that gives them safe wins, forcing them to run things like Lethal Pursuer, Pain Resonance, Grim Embrace, incredibly meta strong perks that are not necessarily really fun for anybody. Me, I have the most fun when I'm running off meta perks, but that is some of the times that I have the most fun in the game. Playing a meta build on Survivor or Killer's side isn't really that fun because it's a safe win for you. You're not interacting with the game's other mechanics and the other things going on in the game. You're just securing yourself a safe win, which isn't really fun for anybody. And it's just simply the fact that survivors are really punished for trying to run any build that isn't incredibly meta that makes the game just less fun to play. It's almost like if you don't run Hyper Focus and Stakeout and things in the current meta of these strong killers, you're just going to lose. So it doesn't allow survivors or killers to really express themselves with their build and show the skill ceiling of a lot of these killers because their hand is forced to play in a way that just gives them very safe 4Ks. Now, let's again talk about this lack of good content for Behavior. Behavior overall has not necessarily pushed out incredibly engaging content these past couple of months. Like I said, with the Springtrap chapter releasing without a survivor, that gave survivors nothing for that chapter, and it was basically just a killer-focused chapter with a new map that, in all honesty, is not that great. Now, we can even talk about the Haunted by Daylight event, which is just a copy and paste as it was from last year, which gave you no reason to even interact with the entire event at all, because most of the time you can get better XP bonuses playing the normal game mode with a Screech Cobbler or anything of the sort. The only thing that it was even fun for was playing with the arcane dowsing rods and then going into the void, but the void wasn't even really fun because it just gave you a void crystal, which yes, could it repair generators, but in the long run that wasn't really that helpful. And the crystal was basically just a pre-nerf fog vial, which broke the game when they released the first time, so re-releasing it isn't necessarily going to make the game any more fun. We can even talk about the most recent pallet density update, which just makes the game really not fun to play for killers that aren't running an incredibly meta build, or at this point just running things like Brutal Strength, because you were just getting hit pallet after pallet after pallet after pallet, and it's damn near impossible to create dead zones in the game where there are no pallets, because that is a fundamental point of playing killer, is making dead zones and then forcing survivors into the dead zones where they have low amounts of resources. But in this current update, every single map is Gideon's meat plant, so it doesn't even matter. And again, to speak about the current meta of the game, for any of you that are up to date with Hens and the bigger creators in this space, Hens just created a new build that allowed him to break the record for the 4-man survivor escape. And he broke this record by, I think it was almost 10 seconds. He escaped in 2 minutes and 26 seconds and was regularly able to escape in under 3 minutes from the killer. I don't need to explain to you why the meta of this game and why that specific meta just breaks the game down. Because who wants to play against a group of survivors that are just running Bardic Inspiration, Tammy Time, like things like this that are just escaping in under 3 minutes? Nobody wants to play against that. Even as Survivor, that's not fun, because again, it's just a safe win, and nobody wants a safe win. People want to be challenged. People want something that's actually going to challenge their skills and give them a reason to play the game. Another testament to behavior shitty content that's been being released is the Michael Myers rework, and this is probably one of my least favorite things that has happened to the game so far. They took a very iconic killer, the very first collaboration of the game, one of the biggest killers that has come to their game, and basically just made him another Dash Killer, another Ghoul, another Blight, another Chucky. They took away all the things that made him fun and cool to play, not to mention how inaccurate he is to the media that he comes from. I don't remember the last time that motherfucking Michael Myers ever ran, laced up his Air Jordan 1s and started running Laurie Strode down Limpkin Lane. And it's also not to mention that the Myers rework overall didn't do much for his character. It didn't give him really a buff. It didn't really make him interact in the game in any special way. I think by most people's standards, it actually made him weaker than he was and didn't really do anything, again, to his character. Now, to continue to talk about broken killers, let's talk about the Krasu, and this is arguably one of the worst things that happened to Dead by Daylight. The Krasu in the PTB was not that strong. Was she stronger than most killers on the release? Yes, but again, she was an original killer that was kind of underwhelming. And then they giga buffed her right out of the PTB and made her the strongest killer in the meta of the game, to the point where the only counterplay to her was to just go as far away from survivors as you possibly could and die in corners and just drop a million pallets, because otherwise you are kinda just cooked. And the reason that the Krasu was so strong was because it took multiple really strong things and combined them into one character. The 120% speed, the third person, the incredible chase power. It took all of the greatest things from some of the higher tier killers in the game and put them in one killer. I don't need to tell you how disgusting that is to play against and to play with. Obviously, for killers, it's incredibly fun. You just get to get 4Ks with no perks, with anything. People were going on 50, 100 game win streaks the minute she came out, because that's how strong she was. And just overall, in the community of Dead by Daylight, there are a few things that are just gaining more relevancy and things that are just being seen more. And that is disconnecting and then the retraction of so many things that they have done. Dead by Daylight, when these PTB changes came out with the Krasu, these like anti-tunneling and slugging and changes and things such as these, they walked back on these, but are now being reintroduced in a new and upcoming PTB, which I will be talking about. I'm not sure if I'll be talking about them in this video because I have not done enough research on those. I haven't really looked and seen what is going on with them necessarily yet, but they are bringing them back. These completely broken changes, they are bringing them back, which is it just kind of goes to show where Dead by Daylight is at with content. And in the most recent dev stream, it was just kind of glaringly obvious that behavior doesn't listen to their killers. They had a survey, which is why most people were uninstalling the game, and the reasons that they were uninstalling the game or quitting the game, right? And there were maybe 2 things on the entire list that pertained to killers or would have made you think about killers, or that would have been in a killer's mind. So the reason that we're not getting any data from killer perspectives, and the reason that we're not seeing why killers are DCing, is because behavior doesn't care, and they're not asking why they're DCing because they simply do not care about their killer player base at all. The Dead by Daylight devs don't even really have enough knowledge on their own game. Within the dev stream, they said that the map with the most slugging occurrences, with the most like 4-man slugs on 5 gens, right? I'm not necessarily sure if that was the exact reason, but just the map where the slugging was most prevalent was Gideon's meat plant. And everybody in the chat was screaming, because the devs, of course, asked, well, why is that so? And everybody in the chat was screaming, pallets, 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 pallets. And they kind of just brushed it off as if it was a joke and it didn't matter, when they literally gave every map the level of pallets of Gideon's meat plant. And Gideon's meat plant has the most pallets in the game. Not only the most pallets in the game, but the most safe pallets. Pallets that you can pre-drop from a million miles away and make so much distance on the killer. And it just goes to show how disconnected the devs are from the actual base of gamers that are playing their game, and how much they really don't understand what is going on with their own game. And again, just another reason people just aren't having fun with Dead by Daylight right now is because Behavior is just pushing out no good content. They pushed out a skin for Dredge that was just a broken skin. It literally covers like half of your screen and you can barely see what's going on. Again, it just shows that DBD creators and Behavior Interactive just really does not give a shit about you or me or anybody that's playing the game. And I would love to say that it's not like that, and I would love to say that they care about us deeply, about their fan base and about the people that are playing their game, but it just really does not seem like that. And I'm really just like, every piece of evidence that comes towards me and every single update, it just seems like they are getting more and more disconnected from the people who are actually playing the game. And on second thought, and after reviewing some of this video, I will speak a little bit about the new 9.3 PTB, because if you've seen the Scott Jund video, he posted it on like Twitter or something, where he got 3 sprint bursts in one chase. I don't think I need to explain to Survivor or Killer mains why that is incredibly stupid, and just why do you need 3 sprint bursts in one chase? 1 sprint burst, 1 live, like 1 exhaustion perk, 1 dead hard is enough to make enough distance, right? Why you would need 3 of them, and why DBD thought this was a good idea to implement, I have no comment on. I don't speak for Behavior. I wish I could. I wish I was on their dev team so I could explain how absolutely idiotic these changes that they're making are, but I don't have that insider information for you people. And again, I'm actually reading the patch notes on my side monitor here. Survivors that are unhooked or unhook themselves receive unhook protections for 30 seconds. You have half of a minute worth of endurance, 10% haste, elusive, which hides grunts, pains, aura, scratch marks. So again, basically just base kit off the record. You have an immunity to AFK crows. The survivors make no sounds, again, coughing, vomiting, things of that nature. The survivor will see the killer's aura within 32 meters for 10 seconds, so you just get like free kindred, kinda, like just free aura read. The survivor, well, it can still be attacked and get hit by power, but of course you have endurance, so all you have to do afterwards is just mend. These effects linger for 3 seconds after being healed for a full health state. So you can be full healed and still have all of these effects for 3 seconds after, which if played correctly can just be game changing for you. They're lost when you perform a conspicuous action, which is like repairing generators and things of that nature, I think, like other like dumb things that they consider conspicuous. And then there's like unique hook bonuses, which you get Bloodlust Tier 1 when hooking a survivor that is different than the last one hooked. You get a 10% blood point multiplier. Are we for real? 10%. You could tunnel and play with an escape cake, and it would make all of no damn difference. It's just, I'm sorry to tell you guys, this update is just, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely preposterous that they even proposed these changes. I don't know who at Behavior sat down and really thought that these were good ideas. And then, of course, all of the unbreakable stuff, like the self-recovery things, just absolutely nutty stuff, guys. And let's actually continue reading the patch updates. Let's look at the slugging reduction, the self-recovery. After being down by the killer, the resolve bar appears. The resolve bar takes 120 seconds to fill. Progress does not reset between downs. Let's listen to that. It takes 120 seconds, but it does not reset between downs. So you can get downed, be healed, back up, and then immediately as soon as you go down again, just get up. after you've rated 120 seconds, the 2 minutes of being slugged. The resolve bar fills 33% faster for each additional current survivor in the dying state. So you have 3 survivors in the dying state. You're getting, that's what, like a 66% boost. Once the resolve bar is full, you can pick yourself up, obviously, and then, disable it in custom games. The crawling speed is increased from